A seismic shift just fractured women's professional basketball, carrying profound implications for Caitlin Clark's upcoming campaign. Behind closed doors, a colossal and deeply poisonous organizational facade is violently splintering into countless jagged fragments. For 6 exhaustive months, the fiercely proud and established guard truly thought they had flawlessly orchestrated an ingenious executive overthrow. These veterans ruthlessly armed the press. Orchestrated narrative bombings were relentlessly deployed toward headquarters by this rogue collective. Furthermore, the players presumptuously predicted that finalizing fresh labor terms would instantly trigger the spectacular public execution of Chief Executive Kathy Engelbert. Yet those athletes calculated everything incorrectly, failing disastrously across every conceivable strategic dimension. Welcome back to the professional women's basketball arena. The broadcast never traffics in fabricated labor tales or polite journalistic fluff. The focus remains solely upon the brutal, merciless truths of institutional dominance, multi-million-dollar financial formulas, and savage executive endurance. The audience must secure their surroundings entirely today. Spectators must disable all digital alerts and offer their absolute, unblinking focus, for the mega-wealthy proprietary coalition violently demonstrated to the athletes exactly who controls the worldwide hoops universe. Those traditional broadcast channels and hopelessly naive everyday spectators possess zero comprehension regarding how supreme institutional hierarchies truly function. The masses foolishly absorb podcast grievances from tenured stars like Nafisa Collier, wrongly presuming that ultra-rich proprietors harbor any genuine concern for workforce feelings. However, aggressive private investors completely refuse to distribute massive 8-figure agreements merely from a place of philanthropic warmth. Moreover, ownership absolutely never terminates incredibly productive administrators simply to pacify a frustrated roster of players. 40 business years are celebrated this month. Quitting was never considered, nor was retreating from incredibly arduous predicaments. True administrative guidance invariably ascends naturally, and the prevailing executive philosophy firmly dictates that whatever organizational fractures inevitably emerge, they will absolutely be repaired decisively by those in ultimate command. Observers must absorb the incredibly pure, undeniable, administrative armor woven throughout that precise declaration, where Kathy Engelbert forcefully affirms her enduring resilience and intends to stay firmly in charge. All dialogue has officially concluded. The commissioner violently muted the Mutinous Athletes Association through one brilliantly engineered audio snippet. The official openly championed her heavily debated reign as an enormous monetary triumph, effectively annihilating all inside bargaining power held by older stars. These pros deliberately embarked upon widespread press circuits to shred the leader's capability. The players boldly gambled their personal career legacies entirely to trigger an administrative leadership swap. Unfortunately, the mutineers failed spectacularly and embarrassingly, leaving Kathy Engelbert comfortably entrenched atop the absolute pinnacle of organizational authority once again. The boss commands unquestionable, supreme sovereignty regarding every functional gear driving the association. Furthermore, within the savage, ultra-streamlined realm of business strategy, botched mutinies perpetually breed catastrophic repercussions. Directors who outlast such character assassinations invariably deploy a silent, deeply methodical campaign of vengeance. Yet the sheer horror surrounding this distinct predicament avoids whatever punishment Engelbert might inflict upon those aging players. The genuinely poisonous institutional threat actually envelops the fundamental financial motor powering the whole game. The most devastating accidental casualty trapped within this colossal leadership war happens to be rookie sensation Caitlin Clark. The analytical lens must now quietly pivot toward the profoundly compromised, intensely partisan environment defining the refereeing staff. During the previous campaign, local officials executed a glaringly apparent, fiercely hostile suppression protocol. Those judges consciously permitted fiercely jealous older pros to violently batter the billion-dollar cornerstone. The umpires deliberately ignored blatant fouls whenever Caitlin Clark faced continuous beatings, vicious bruises, and merciless hunting. The ordeal represented a heavily synchronized, widely recorded systemic campaign to unnaturally stifle her explosive production. Traditional journalism gently labeled the violence a freshman learning curve, yet elite insiders recognize an intentional, deeply sinister executive directive. Kathy Engelbert consciously observed the most phenomenal monetary spark in athletic lore endure savage beatings across nationwide broadcasts. The commissioner witnessed the most precious business property absorb profoundly perilous, strictly malicious physical blows, yet offered exactly zero active defense for the massive global investment. Now that her leadership seat remains entirely, perpetually guarded by Adam Silver, what incentive exists for evolution past 2026? The patriarch stated no such dialogues had occurred with the board, simply adding that Kathy had executed a magnificent performance since joining the Women's League. The truth was undeniable, just as the Supreme Leader had pointed out. One must truly grasp the sheer gravity of such worldwide backing. The legendary commissioner stands alone as the ultimate apex ruler of professional hoops. The powerful executive effortlessly crushed the players' public relations push while coldly blessing the top boss's massive multi-million-dollar revenue streams. All bargaining power evaporated instantly. The embattled leader no longer had to kiss up to the roster or fix the broken referee system to keep her throne. She could effortlessly let that same venomous, the brutal brand of defense carry on this year if those bitter veterans decided to relentlessly hunt down the superstar rookie. The league boss might just turn a blind eye. Such blatant disregard defined systemic failure perfectly. Yet, the woman in charge was terribly miscalculating one colossal, unpredictable financial storm brewing underneath. The executive remained blind to the monumental high-stakes cash infusions pouring in from regional team proprietors right now. The affluent tycoons were wagering immense fortunes on the Phenom's bodily safety, while leadership risked letting their golden goose get shattered. For instance, the Georgia franchise planned to host 5 blockbuster matchups at their city's premier entertainment palace. Everyone knew their usual facility barely had enough seating to host a neighborhood barbecue. Therefore, they shifted the spectacle to the colossal Metropolitan Arena. Observers had to intensely study the sheer logistical and financial absurdity driving that monumental venue upgrade. Historically, the Southern squad hosted opponents inside a microscopic, utterly forgotten suburban rec center. Yet whenever the Midwestern juggernaut was booked to visit their city, the economic landscape shattered overnight. The organization's executives ruthlessly deserted their intimate stomping grounds without even a fraction of hesitation. They willingly leased the sprawling 18,000-capacity professional venue, the official kingdom of the city's male basketball titans. The team deliberately relocated to an enormous commercial coliseum for the sole purpose of cashing in on the superstar. One must quietly crunch the harsh, informal numbers surrounding this calculated business pivot. The franchise minted hundreds of thousands of dollars through wildly profitable snacks and team apparel. The executives locked down incredibly rich regional television deals just for these supersized athletic events. This unique superstar economic boom was force-feeding millions of dollars in raw, untainted cash straight into the southern metropolis. However, this remarkably delicate financial web hinged entirely upon a single, spine-chilling unknown factor. The Golden Prodigy simply had to remain structurally sound enough to take the floor. Disaster loomed if some resentful longtime player delivered a vicious, unprovoked cheap shot during the opening weeks of May. Should the young icon endure a devastating bodily break due to upper management's negligence, the entire financial blueprint would shatter. The Southern franchise would find themselves trapped with a colossal stadium bill. They would face the nightmare of hosting a meaningless match inside an abandoned 18,000-capacity tomb. That terrifying scenario was precisely why the wealthy overlords needed to instantly intervene and overrule the commissioner's lax policies. Those ruthless investment titans never toyed around when their locked-in revenue streams were threatened. There was zero chance they would let a $78,000 official completely destroy their municipal real estate wagers. The proprietors had to fiercely demand a brutally strict, fiercely rigid level of rule enforcement. Running a multi-billion-dollar international athletic empire was utterly impossible when relying upon incompetent, horribly compromised referees. Furthermore, the sheer desperation of the moment grew exponentially thanks to an impending, massive organizational shakeup. The gentle, artificially funded epoch of keeping squads together was officially deceased and laid to rest. The sports world tottered dangerously upon the cliff edge of the most chaotic, wildly convoluted talent fire sale ever witnessed in the game's lifetime. Official documents outlined a 2-round serpentine selection process, leaving the 13 established clubs to shield exactly 5 athletes each. The critical decisions were mandated for Sunday, March 29th, promising imminent revelations. Observers leaned in to grasp the heavily guarded, profoundly chilling mechanics behind the April 3rd talent raid. Every front office architect across the association was nervously dripping sweat through their high-end designer fabric. They found themselves contractually bound to safeguard no more than 5 core pieces of their lineup. Consequently, They were ruthlessly ordered to throw the remainder of their bench to the immensely wealthy new ownership groups. Meanwhile, the Midwestern Brain Trust gazed in horror at an impending, financially devastating locker room massacre. Saving their franchise savior, the prodigious guard, was a non-negotiable imperative that required zero second-guessing. The executives also had to fiercely lock down their wildly profitable, dominant enforcer holding down the paint. The pressing question remained: how would management handle the exorbitant price tag of unrestricted superstar Kelsey Mitchell? How would the front office manage those impeccably coordinated, fiercely relentless outside guards such as Lexi Hull and Sophie Cunningham? Shielding the whole organizational roster seemed statistically impossible. The franchise was destined to hemorrhage profoundly crucial bench contributors long before training camp formally kicked off. Wealthy investment tycoons representing Portland and Toronto lurked like apex predators, relentlessly hunting for fresh opportunities. Those rival groups held untouched payroll ledgers alongside a ruthless directive to steal away premier superstars instantly. Indiana found itself bracing to endure the most perilous, exceptionally unstable winter period ever recorded by the club, utterly besieged by well-funded new league additions. The organization functioned beneath a recently increased, fiercely competitive $7 million payroll limit, desperately depending upon seemingly flawed referees to safeguard their most lucrative marquee player. Room for administrative blunders had definitively vanished, reducing the safety net to practically nothing. Should the head executive misjudge just one roster safeguard, the squad would entirely obliterate their title aspirations. Should Kathy Angelbert decline to reform the umpiring standards, her inaction would directly ruin those spectacular arena enhancements. Observers were thrust into the brutally savage financial landscape of modern women's basketball. The broadcast welcomed all viewers to the ultimate analytical platform. The program mercilessly tore apart the harsh truths defining the worldwide athletic industry. Fabricated management storylines and timid public relations tactics were strictly forbidden throughout these intense broadcast sessions. The discussion centered solely around the harsh, undeniable certainties revealed by pure statistical data. Any fan seeking the web's most fiercely objective and transparent hoops coverage was urged to pay attention. Viewers were instructed to forcefully hit the follow icon immediately, ensuring their place among elite tactical minds. The audience was prompted to leave heavy approval ratings, propelling this vital institutional critique swiftly across digital recommendation systems. The host demanded raw statistical feedback regarding this colossal front office clash, directing commentators to the discussion space below. Could wealthy proprietors compel the commissioner into shielding Caitlin Clark against hostile, deeply entrenched older players? Perhaps league leadership might permit malicious on-court attacks, ultimately devastating the profitability of those massive stadiums. Furthermore, which deeply cherished player would statistics dictate Indiana must surrender during the upcoming franchise dispersal event? Followers were asked to provide rigorously calculated forecasts before the narrator returned for another intense institutional analysis. Nobody could afford to look away, as an institutional battlefield had awakened, guaranteeing that fragile entities would be completely abandoned. Amidst the chaotic wreckage,